The Orphans of Simitra. Chapter 11. Where is Mina? Come and see. All the fields have gone, and the trees and the houses. There's nothing left. Your eyes must not be open yet, Mina. Not a thing. Even the dike has disappeared. It's terrifying. Porphyros got up and joined his sister at the window. Mina was not dreaming. The trees, the houses, the dike had all gone. Terror-stricken, Mina was clinging to her brother's arm when a voice called from the courtyard below. Now then, up there, why are you sticking your noses in the air? It's not the right sort of day to go looking for airplanes. Mina was reassured to hear Pete's voice. What's happened, Pete? We can't see a thing. Leave Emily. Haven't you ever been in the fog before? They never had. Fog was as unknown in Greece as the turpentine tree in Holland. They went down into the courtyard. It's like this in September every year, Pete explained. It means that summer is over, and autumn storms are not far off. Summer over. But there hasn't been any summer. Mina sighed. They had to light the lamps on their bikes to go to school that morning. It was impossible to see 5 yards ahead along the dike. Cars crawled along, their yellow eyes only just piercing the thick fog. Do they last a long time, these fogs? Mina asked anxiously. It all depends. Sometimes it's only a few hours, but most often we have it for quite a few days. Last year it stayed over a week. The wind blows it away, and I can't tell you it's not a warm wind. Not a warm wind, Mina repeated, pulling her raincoat down over her knees. Pete knew what he was talking about. In the evening of the second day the wind came to shake the big poplars along the Kinedale, scattering clouds of dead leaves, and the fog was dispersed. It was autumn now. If only the answer to our letter would come before winter, Mina said. You mustn't be impatient, Mina. Do you think they'll let us go back? Porphyros did not know what to say. 2 weeks earlier, without saying anything to Mrs. Van Hoolen, he had given to Mina's entreaties and written to Greece asking for permission to return to their own land. Since he could not complain of illness or ill treatment, he didn't have very much hope. Those of our friends who stayed behind, he said, are very much worse off than we are. So you think? Said the little girl, who did not believe him. When the letter did arrive, it was a bitter disappointment. They were told that they ought to be ashamed of complaining, that they would never be happier than they were at the moment, and that the first return party was not planned to take place before the following summer. Porphyros found it almost impossible to console his sister. Don't cry so, Mina dearest. The winter will go by quickly. Think of those big logs Mrs. Van Hoolen kept burning when we first came here, and we can skate when the Kinedale freezes. The day following the arrival of the letter was a Wednesday, always a free half-day for Dutch school children. After a week of stinging gales, the wind from the sea had calmed down. It was warm, with long spells of sunshine, and the sky was almost clear. Let's go for a good long walk together, shall we? Suggested Porphyros. Mina shook her head. I'm sick of going to the garage to look at cars and tractors with their insides out. We'll go the other way, as far as the Cruinan water meadow. She shook her head again. What about Gravelinen, then the market town? Or anywhere you like. I'd rather stay with Johanna on the farm. He sat beside her on the bench outside the stables. She did not speak. She was trying not to seem sad. Normally, Porphyros was never to be found on the farm on Wednesday afternoons. He began to think of the garage that Cruinan, his boss, was expecting, any day now, the delivery of the doctor's new car from a German factory. Porphyros was dying to see it, but he had no intention of running off without Mina if she wanted to be with him. Are you quite sure you don't want to come for a walk, Mina? I promised Johanna I'd help her to make Pete's birthday cake, but you go. It's such a lovely day. He did not quite like to go. He was ready to give up all thought of the Cruinan garage and take her wherever she would like to go, if only she would smile. Here is Johanna, she said. She's bought the flour. You can go now. Porphyros hugged her and ran off to find Pete. By unspoken consent, they made for Cruinan. A few people, curious to have a look at the doctor's new car, which had just that minute been delivered, were assembled in front of the garage. The two boys inspected all the glittering chromium and nickel plate. Porphyros pictured himself in his red uniform. That car was just about worthy of such glory. Then almost at once Mina's bitter smile flashed through his mind when she accused him of being only interested in cars. All his pleasure left him. He walked around the wonderful car a few more times, and said, "Shall we go?" Pete could not believe his ears. Porphyros had never before suggested that it was time to go. "Don't you like it?" "Of course I do, Pete. Only, you see, mechanics like us, well, we're only interested in breakdowns. It won't be long before we'll be seeing it at close quarters." "That's so," said Pete, who had every respect for his friend's skill. Although Porphyros was in such a hurry now to get back, he had to go into the village first with Pete, who had shopping to do. Then, delaying him further, when they were halfway across the dike on their way home, he had to stop and mend a puncture in his back tire. It was difficult to repair his bike in the gale that was blowing again. Pete had never seen the Greek boy so clumsy with his hands. When at last they reached the farm, it was growing dark. "Where's Mina?" Porphyros asked at once. "I don't know," said Mrs. Van Hoolen tranquilly. "I haven't seen her for quite a while, but it's not late yet." He went out into the yard again, and saw Johanna coming out of the dairy, carrying a bowl of cream. "Where's Mina?" "She told me she was staying in with you this afternoon. She helped me make the birthday cake. Then she went off for a walk." "Which say?" "She said something about Gradlin and she'll soon be back." "What are you looking so worried about? You don't think the wind will carry her off, do you?" He made no reply. Clearly, no one on the farm was anxious about her. He alone was afraid that something had happened to her. However, he just waited, without saying anything. "It's certainly getting dark," Mrs. Van Hoolen finally said. "It's not the first time Mina's gone off for a walk by herself, but she's never come back so late before." Porphyros questioned Johanna again. "That's all I know," the little girl answered. "It was about 3:30 when she went off, just after we put the cake in the oven. I saw her walking along toward Gradlin. She waved to me." Another half hour went by. By this time the whole family was anxious. "It's rather strange," said Mr. Van Hoolen, looking at the clock hanging on the wall. "We'd better go and see what's happened. Porphyros, get your coat and come with me." Outside, in the dark night, the wind tossed dead leaves into swirling drifts as it grew wilder. The man and the boy walked along side by side. Porphyros was silent, asking himself questions over and over again. If Mina had only gone for a walk, she would be back by now. Something had happened to her. But what? That letter from Greece was at the bottom of it all. Mina had not been the same since it arrived. They reached Gradlin and went into several shops to make inquiries. No one had seen the Greek girl. At last, however, they found a baker's boy who thought he had seen her going along the dike that crossed the big water meadow. "About what time?" Mr. Van Hoolen asked him. "It was still daylight. She looked as though she was in a hurry." "You're certain it was her?" "You can't mistake her. No one else around here has such an olive skin and dark hair." Mr. Van Hoolen turned to Porphyros with a questioning look. "I don't know what she's up to," the boy said. "She told me nothing." They battled along the dike, a steep embankment about 1.5 miles long, that led straight so the coast. At every step Porphyros thought he heard cries for help. But it was only the wind. Breathless, they came to the end of the dike, which lay buried in sand. The sea was invisible, yet made its presence felt, angry and menacing. The only house upon the shore was the customs man's hut, which had the light showing in its tiny window. "Do go in," begged Porphyros, trembling with cold and anxiety. An elderly customs man was dozing in a chair, his arms along the back, his legs outstretched at each side of a miniature porcelain stove gently purring with heat. The old man started, rubbed his eyes, and listened. "That's right, a little gypsy." "No, not a gypsy," corrected Mr. Van Hoolen, "a little Greek girl. But certainly dark enough to—" "That's what I meant, yes, I saw her. I asked her what she was doing all alone on the shore. I must have scared her. She ran off at once, in that direction." "Did you see her come back?" "No, I didn't. Though, with night coming on and you haven't heard any cry for help." "Don't be funny. Was this whine you couldn't hear the siren on the ferry boat from Chauvin, even if it was only 1/4 of a mile away?" Hardly daring to breathe, Porphyros hung upon every word. Why had Mina come to that desolate wind-swept shore only to get lost? Why, why? Mr. Van Hoolen, we've just got to help her. She's fallen down on the shore. She's waiting. Listen. She calling me. She calling me. But it was only the wind, and the screaming gulls. If you like, said the customs man. I'll go over this shore a little later, though I'd be astonished if— oh no, sir, not later, at once. She calling us. The good man lit his lantern, a strong lamp that no hurricane could put out, but it shed such a small glow in the vast darkness. The sand, still wet from high tide, was difficult to walk on. They breasted the wind, the customs man walking in the middle between Porphyros and Mr. Van Hoolen. From time to time he raised his lamp so as to throw light upon some piece of flotsam ahead. Each time, Porphyro's heart stopped beating. Where are you, mine? Oh, where are you? They plodded on for a long time, until the customs man came to a halt. Believe me, if she lost her way along here, she won't have stayed on the shore to get frozen. You'll find her asleep in some shelter somewhere tomorrow morning, or even at home by the time you get back. That was what Porphyros was secretly hoping. Retracting their steps, they came back to the hut. The customs man offered them a mug of tea to refresh them, after which Mr. Van Hoolen and the boy went off toward the farm. I'll find her back home, Porphyros went on saying to himself, to keep up his courage. Midnight sounded as they were going through the sleeping town of Gradleynan. Nearly 2 miles to go. Porphyros was dropping with fatigue. I'll find her back home. At last they saw the farmhouse, or rather the lighted rectangles of 2 windows. Porphyros summoned enough strength to run. The tall silhouette of the Dutch woman was framed in the lighted doorway. Mrs. Van Hoolen, he cried breathlessly. Is she back? Is she back?